Hello everyone, it's Dr. Sam. I'd like to welcome you to my EyeClarity podcast. This is a show that offers cutting-edge information on how to improve your vision and overall wellness through holistic methods. I so appreciate you spending part of your day with me. If you have questions, you can send them to hello@drsamberne.com. Now, to the latest EyeClarity episode. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Sam, and I'd like to welcome you to another EyeClarity podcast. So I get a number of questions on the relationship between our eyesight and vision and our sports performance. And I don't talk a lot about my sporting interests, but I have many of them. And so I thought today I would weave into the show some of my professional experiences with personal experiences as it relates to sports. So I'll speak personally first. You know, you probably can tell from my pictures and videos that, I've got some gray hair at this point. But when I was younger, I used to play a lot of competitive sports, and probably my favorite sport was basketball. And when I was growing up, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and so a lot of my friends, we would talk a lot about the NBA, and we talked about the Philadelphia 76ers. That was the time when we had the players, Dr. J, Julius Erving, and Moses Malone, and they actually won a championship. And my friends and I used to play a lot of basketball, and I was a really good guard. I played point guard, and when I went to college, I mostly played just intramural basketball, but was really high level. And then when I went to optometry school in Philadelphia, I was playing in a number of leagues, in between the intensive studies that I had to put in. So basketball was always something I was really interested in. And I had the good fortune in one of my internships, which was out in San Diego, where I was working in a practice. It was one of my mentors and teachers, Dr. Robert Sannett. And Dr. Sannett was very involved in vision therapy, and he was working with the men's Olympic volleyball players when I was interning at the office. And so I got to be one of the support people in some of the vision therapy exercises that Dr. Sannett was promoting and doing. And he had a lot of experience and success working with very high-level athletes. So I was very grateful to be, as an intern, I was kind of at the lowest rung of the ladder, but I learned a lot, I absorbed a lot about the importance of things like peripheral vision, visual reaction time, visual tracking. And in this particular situation, what I observed was that these men's volleyball players actually really improved their statistics in terms of spiking the ball and serving the ball. And, in the vision therapy they did, there was an article that was written about the vision therapy that helped them win the gold medal. And that was really because of Dr. Sannett and his expertise. But I got to be a part of that. And I saw the relationship between our vision and our sports. So fast forward, after my internship in San Diego, I moved back to the Philadelphia area. And, when I started my practice in Philly, I began working with, soccer players and tennis players, baseball players. And by helping them enhance their peripheral vision and their visual reaction time, we actually used to have a sports vision board that was blinking different lights, and we would put people on these balance boards or on an eye patch. They would use an eye patch or prism glasses, and it really interfered with their ability to develop eye-hand coordination and visual reaction time. But then when they would take those obstacles off their vision, their scores just skyrocketed. And of course, this began to translate into increasing their sports performance. So at this point in my career, I had given up all of the kind of really competitive sports. I did a lot of things like triathlons and marathons. So I was doing more individual type sports just personally. And then in 1990, I sold my practice in Philadelphia and I moved to New Mexico. And one of the reasons why I moved to New Mexico is because in one of my internship programs, I actually worked at the Indian Hospital in Santa Fe. And I knew that Santa Fe would be a really good place to do more holistic vision optometry. So I moved there in 1990, opened up a practice about 2 years later, and saw a variety of different patients, adults, children, elders, infants. But I still had my hand in sports vision because every now and then I would get, a golfer, or I would get a tennis player or baseball player. And as my reputation started to grow in the desert Southwest, I actually got some professional athletes. These were retired athletes who were really curious, even though they had retired. And I remember one of the NFL players who came to see me, his name was Don Meredith, and he was a former star for the Dallas Cowboys. And so Dandy Don was like retired. He was in his 60s when I met him, but he was a golfer, I believe. And so, I would just watch his vision and help him. And we would talk a lot about the NFL, and it was really fun to have him in the office. Another famous person I had was a jazz musician. He was a flutist, and his name was Herbie Mann. And Herbie was a world-renowned jazz musician. Of course, my wife is a professional flutist, so it was great to, kind of share that experience with her and with Herbie. And I think they met each other. But anyways, Herbie had glaucoma at that time, and so I had helped him through some hard times, and he was just a really cool guy, really great guy. And then another famous person that I treated who still lives in Santa Fe, and he is like one of the best clarinetists in the world. His name is Eddie Daniels. And my father, who was a big jazz musician, was thrilled that I knew Eddie, and Eddie and I became friends and did some eye therapy with him. And he's still putting out some amazing music if you want to check him out on Spotify. But I still was very interested in sports vision, and I still was interested in the NBA. And one of the things that I loved doing was going to these sports camps, these basketball camps. And one of the camps I attended, and this is where you're kind of an older guy and, you're looking at these great athletes or coaches, was at the Omega Institute. I went to a camp that was being run by the NBA coach, Phil Jackson. Of course, Phil was, at that time, he had just left the Chicago Bulls, and he was now getting ready to coach the LA Lakers. And so in taking his camp, he had a more spiritual vent on basketball. And so it was meditation, and we did these really interesting movement things, and of course, great stories. But it still taught, it got me interested in, well, of course, in the NBA, things like peripheral vision and eye-hand coordination and being able to shoot free throws consistently were all things that I thought about. And I was working with more college athletes, so I never worked with the NBA players. But in my mid-30s, as I had moved to Santa Fe, and I was still quite a good basketball player, I decided to do the fantasy basketball camp with Magic Johnson. And that was kind of a thrill because it was in Maui. And at that time, I took my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and of course, she was really impressed to go to Maui. And so I got to hang out with Magic and Jerry West and Kurt Rambis. And it was really fun to be in that fantasy camp. It was amazing. And I ended up being the MVP of the final game, which was a real thrill. And so I became a Lakers fan and really, really enjoyed the Lakers. And then when Phil went to the Lakers, was always kind of just a fan, really connected with them. And of course, we fast forward, we had the Kobe and Shaq era, and now we have the LeBron era, and we'll see what happens if, as this goes to press, if Kyrie Irving is going to come back and play with LeBron. But really enjoy, working with athletes, and in my own athletic career, just really found that connection in sports vision and performance, and still talk about it, in certain instances when it comes up, even though for many of you, I don't really speak a lot about my interest in the sporting world because there's so much in health and healing and some of the other things that I worked with in terms of autism and so on. But I thought I'd give you a glimpse of that in my interest. I'll probably talk a little more about it as we move into the NFL, because I have helped some college athletes, especially at different positions, and it's been fun to see their evolution. And of course, it's kind of interesting in the NFL how traumatic brain injury has affected what we call the CTE syndrome. And I'm very concerned about that. And of course, I talk to parents who want to know about traumatic brain injury and brain health, especially in the younger kiddies who are starting in sports and NFL. And, I had a few concussions in my sporting career, and, it's been something that I've done a lot of body work and craniosacral therapy around my brain and other, oxygen-rich type therapies to improve my brain health. But it's definitely, when you play sports, this is one of the things that can happen. And, when you love something and you want to do it, sometimes, there's risk involved. So thanks a lot for listening today. I appreciate your attention. If you've got any questions, you can always email me at hello@drsamberne.com. And I know I'll be speaking more about this subject. And until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from the EyeClarity podcast show today. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. See you here next time.